Here are a few people who completely took advantage of their situations. Fraud advisor. Bilal Abbas had a taste for the finer things. He loved Rolex watches, luxury vacations, designer brands, pink champagne, and flaunting his cash on social media. He was a frequent customer at the jewelry store, David Summerfield, where he spent thousands almost every day. But David Summerfield Jewelers started to grow suspicious of their loyal customer when Abbas's friend, Jordan Hamilton Thomas, came to the store 3 days in a row to purchase Rolexes worth nearly $20,000 each. The next time he went to the store, a police officer was waiting at the door. Hamilton Thomas pushed the officer out of the way and ran away, but he and his co-conspirators were quickly caught. Police later uncovered that Hamilton Thomas was part of a 3-man operation to steal people's bank information, and it was all traced back to Abbas. Abbas was employed at Santander International Bank. Ironically, he worked in their anti-fraud unit. As a member of this department, he was granted access to confidential customer details, and it was his job to protect this information at all costs. Instead, he did the opposite. Over 14 months, Abbas stole people's bank account information and card numbers, selling them for over $100,000 to his accomplice Umair Maimon. Maimon used the customers' accounts to purchase luxury items and fancy vacations. Abbas listed himself as a fraud advisor on his resume. He stated that working in a bank requires trust, honesty, and good mathematical skills, all qualities he had. Oh, the irony. The 3-man scam of Maimon, Hamilton Thomas, and Abbas spent over $100,000 of customers' savings on Dolce & Gabbana, Versace, Spanish resorts, Rolex watches, and jet skis. They didn't try to hide their riches either. They had photo shoots with wads of cash and even took pictures pouring Laurent Perrier pink champagne and vodka all over Rolex watches. Their crimes were uncovered because an employee at David Summerfield Jewelers had a gut feeling that something was wrong and called the police. Police investigated the men in April 2018 and quickly realized that they were spending a suspicious amount of money that didn't align with their salaries. The prosecutor detailed how Abbas completely destroyed customers' trust and left them feeling distressed and anxious. He stole from the people he was supposed to protect. Data from 21 customers and 13 businesses in the UK were stolen and sold. Abbas was sentenced to 2 years behind bars. Maimon got 2 years and 3 months, and Hamilton Thomas got 2 years and 2 months. Thankfully, all of the victims got their money back. In addition to the massive scam, Maimon also pleaded guilty to dangerous driving, and Hamilton Thomas pleaded guilty to assault with intent to resist arrest. A spokesperson from Santander was happy to see these 3 men brought to justice. One Fund. The Boston Marathon is one of the most famous marathons in the United States. Athletes train for years for the chance to prove ultimate endurance. On April 15, 2013, what was supposed to be a joyful and fun challenge for runners and their loved ones turned into tragedy when explosions went off near the finish line, leaving 3 people deceased and 260 injured. One Fund Boston was set up by the former mayor of Boston, Thomas Menino, and former governor, Deval Patrick, to help victims and their families receive resources and treatment after the tragedy. The One Fund was tremendously successful and gave nearly $80 million to the victims and their families. It used an additional $1.5 million to create programs to support survivors receiving long-term care. As people rallied around the victims and their families with an outpouring of love and financial support, Andrea Gauss saw the perfect opportunity to make a profit. Andrea Gauss was a 26-year-old New York native and mother of 2 who claimed she suffered a traumatic brain injury after the Boston Marathon incident. She filed a detailed claim that said she had long-term memory loss, impaired speech, and loss of motor skills. She claimed to be treated at Boston Medical Center for 2 days after the bombing and Albany Medical Center Hospital for 10 days after that, which would have racked up thousands in medical bills. These lies allowed her to claim $480,000 from One Fund to pay for her hospitalizations and support her recovery. Shortly after receiving her payout, Gauss made a $377,500 down payment on a home in Clifton Park, Massachusetts. Not only that, but she signed up for a Heroes Cruise specifically dedicated to the survivors of the Boston Marathon. The Boston Attorney General's office received an anonymous tip that Gauss wasn't even in Massachusetts during the bombings and was lying about her supposed injuries. After some investigation, police found that Gauss was never a patient at either Boston Medical Center or Albany Medical Center Hospital. All of the paperwork was completely fake. She was arrested, pleaded not guilty, and held on $200,000 bail. Though she denied any wrongdoing initially, Gauss later pleaded guilty to larceny at the Suffolk Superior Court. Prosecutors wanted a 4 to 5 year prison sentence, the maximum sentence for theft. Her relatives took the stand to defend Gauss, saying that she didn't commit a crime and that the charges were just a big mistake. But the court had a hard time believing her innocence when it came out that Gauss had tried to scam the law 15 times since 2005 with charges including larceny, forgery, and possession of stolen property. Gauss was sentenced to 2.5 to 3 years in state prison for defrauding one fund. The money she swindled from the charity was recovered and dispersed to real victims. Gauss is out of jail now, and we can only hope she's learned her lesson. Or maybe she's trying to scam the COVID Paycheck Protection Program. Going viral. In October 2021, a TikTok went viral of a Waffle House employee holding a baby while preparing meals. The video was captioned, "Ain't no why she got her baby in here," shaking my head. People were shocked by how unsanitary and unsafe it was to care for a child while cooking customers' meals. Others were saddened by how this working mother had no choice but to take care of her baby while on the clock. The 12-second video got more than 3.7 million views in 2 days. A TikTok user named Tiffany Clark reached out to TMZ claiming to be the woman in the video and gave a tragic backstory to the situation. She said the baby's name was Octavia, and she wasn't her baby, but rather her brother's who had already passed away. She said the child could have been taken away by social services if she hadn't taken her to work that day. Clark said she wasn't cooking with the baby in her arms and was only just setting up plates. She also said that Waffle House was so upset by the TikTok that they suspended her from work for a week. As soon as this woman came forward claiming to be the mystery Waffle House employee in the viral TikTok, the media ran with the story and posted her Cash App in the hopes of sending her money to support her and baby Octavia. TMZ, the first media outlet to speak with Clark, didn't post the woman's Cash App, but many others did. And it's a good thing TMZ didn't post the link because, as it turns out, this woman wasn't actually the Waffle House employee. Though the video is semi-true, the backstory shared with the media was a complete lie. People who donated to Cash App just bought into a scam. Waffle House's VP of Public Relations told TMZ that they investigated the TikTok video and found that the social media posts about it were completely false. Though they acknowledged that a Waffle House employee really was holding a baby while on the clock, the baby wasn't related to her by any means. The real woman in the TikTok never reached out to the media nor shared her Cash App. Waffle House also never suspended her from work. The truth is that the baby in the video was a coworker's daughter who the employee was trying to calm down. The employee has since been trained in proper safety and health precautions. The scammer is still out there with a TikTok profile with more than 14,000 followers. We still don't know how much money she made from these lies. The Great Exploit. In April 2021, 6 people were officially arrested and charged for scamming the National Disability Insurance Scheme, NDIS, out of $10 million over 4 years. The scammers were 5 men and 1 woman in their 20s and 30s. The ringleaders were Mohammed Salam and his wife Nora Bader and his brother Muath Salam. The other accomplices were Ghazwan Sharouk and Ahmed Moussa. Another man, a 37-year-old Frenchman named Jagurtha Zafrain, was also arrested as a person of interest. They saw NDIS as the perfect opportunity to steal. They set up fake companies and then submitted inflated invoices to get rebates from NDIS. The ringleaders alone received more than $3 million in fraudulent payments. Their greed drove them to steal money from disabled Australians who really needed it. But what exactly is NDIS? The NDIS provides financial support to Australians with a permanent and significant disability that impairs their ability to work and make an income. By 2027, the NDIS is projected to give out $22 billion to roughly 500,000 Australians. It also connects disabled people with community resources such as doctors, sports clubs, support groups, libraries, schools, and information about the support available in each state and local government. The team of 6 scammers consisted of 3 companies that worked to obtain funding for people who didn't have a disability. They also received rebates for people who do genuinely have a disability but had no idea that money was being claimed on their behalf. They collaborated with NDIS participants and service providers to inflate claims and receive the funding they were not entitled to. Once they received the cash, the money went right into their pockets. The ringleaders paid Gazwan $40,000 to set up a bank account under his name dedicated to receiving these fraudulent payments. The Australian Federal Police estimate that they stole more than $10 million in NDIS funding, making it the largest fraud case in the agency's history. They spent the money on anything and everything, including sports cars, gold bullion, cryptocurrency, and even nose beers. 11 search warrants across Sydney revealed that the team of 6 had a treasure trove of valuables, including 8 kilograms of gold bullion with an estimated value of $600,000. They also had $600,000 in cash, another $600,000 in cryptocurrency, and a large amount of jewelry. Several sports cars, including a BMW M3, Audi Q7, and Porsche Cayenne, worth over $250,000 were seized and towed by the police. They were arrested in April 2021 and spent the night in jail before appearing in court. They were all granted bail except for Mohammed, the ringleader. The others were given very strict bail conditions in which they had to surrender their passports, forbidden to leave New South Wales, and can't be involved with any company that provides NDIS services. Mohammed Salam and his wife got hit with some pretty heavy charges for ripping off NDIS. She was also accused of enrolling NDIS participants, using fake documents, and submitting claims for services she never provided. She had a history of failing to comply with court orders. All of them are currently out on bail as of June 2022 while they await their fates. The investigations into the scheme continue with more arrests anticipated. The Cougar. Willard Ross Lanham was a former New York City Department of Education consultant who was convicted of stealing $1.7 million from the school system. He defended his crimes by saying he deserved some sympathy due to the lavish spending habits and exploits of his cougar ex-wife. He claimed that his ex-wife, Laura, was going through a costly midlife crisis involving nightclubs and dating young men in their 20s. He said the situation drove him to steal funds from the city's school system to support their 16-year-old daughter. According to the U.S. Attorney's Office for the Southern District of New York, Lanham worked as a consultant to the DOE and managed multiple initiatives, including Project Connect, which was intended to provide internet access to all public schools in the city. During his tenure, he was the man in charge of Project Connect, in addition to 2 other initiatives, and was responsible for hiring contractors and subcontractors to execute the projects. He made $200,000 per year for a total of $1.4 million during his 6 years with the DOE. Apparently, that wasn't enough. Without approval, Lanham used $1.7 million of DOE money intended for Project Connect for his own personal use. He did this by using his own outside consultants through Lanham Consultants. Then he used Lanham Enterprises to pay the consultants directly. He billed a Project Connect subcontractor for work done by Lanham Consultants unrelated to the DOE. The amount he billed for was much greater than the actual rate, so Lanham could pocket the difference. Then he told another DOE subcontractor to bill Lanham Enterprises for the same amount and use his company to charge another subcontractor an excessive amount for the same work. Again, he pocketed the difference. In both cases, Lanham Enterprises didn't contribute anything to the actual work that Lanham Consultants was doing for Project Connect. Yet, the DOE was paying for all of it. The scam went on for nearly 6 years, allowing him to pocket $1.7 million in addition to his $1.4 million salary. He used the money to buy luxury cars and purchase and develop Long Island real estate. When Lanham appeared in court, he asked for leniency because his cougar ex-wife had spent all their money. To prove his point, he spoke of how Laura Lanham posed her pics online and was an internet blogger on a website called Cougar Life and called herself a yummy mommy who was proud to be a cougar. She said she only joined the website after the financial difficulties following separating from her husband. She submitted photos to Playboy and embraced the cougar life after realizing she enjoyed attention from younger men. She called it an empowering experience that allowed her to flirt and have fun without the long-term commitment most older men are looking looking for. After hearing that her husband used her midlife crisis in his defense, she was furious. Laura argued that everything her ex said about her was a complete lie and called him a master manipulator who has been a cheater forever. Laura wanted to turn her husband's failed scam into her own success. The 42-year-old vowed to be America's next big reality star. She went on Good Morning America, Inside Edition, and Dr. Phil to tell her side of the story. Unfortunately, the couple had to continue living together in their Long Island home on Laura Lane, a street named and built for her, due to financial difficulties. Talk about a tense household. The scandal has wreaked havoc on the lives of their 3 children. Ultimately, Lanham was found guilty of 4 counts of fraud and theft and faced up to 70 years in prison. He was eventually sentenced to 37 months. In addition to his prison term, the judge ordered 3 years of supervised release and a $100 special assessment fee. He was ordered to forfeit $1.7 million and an additional $1.7 million in restitution to the DOE. But it seems like the city didn't learn its lesson. Even after Lanham was convicted, the DOE hired custom computer specialists again, the company that worked closely with Lanham while scamming the New York school system. Despite the red flags, the DOE has awarded the company over $21.5 million in contracts since 2011.
What's more ingenious? Pretending to be a tennis star's brother and telling the staff to put everything on her tab? Or would it be to scam some rich YouTuber star who absolutely have no time to check on your construction work? Let's get right into some of the most strangely ingenious scams. Number 4. Put it on the tab. Eugenie Bouchard is a Canadian tennis player who's still active on the WTA. She's played against tennis greats such as Serena Williams and Maria Sharapova. She played Williams in the Australian Open and became the first Canadian woman to play in a women's Wimbledon final. When Eugenie's not on the court, she's relaxing in her beautiful 5-star high-rise apartment building, One Hotel South Beach in Miami, Florida. 2019 was a tough year for Eugenie in tennis. She suffered 10 straight defeats and was especially disappointed when she failed to qualify for the Bronx Open after a big loss against Kaya Kanepi. But she dusted herself off and started immediately practicing for the Grand Slam US Open in New York. But in addition to many tournament upsets, Eugenie faced a new challenge off the tennis court, a scam worth tens of thousands of dollars. When Eugenie received a $42,000 bill for charges she didn't recognize, she knew something was up. One Hotel South Beach said that the charges came from her brother, but her brother wasn't even staying there. Meanwhile, Solomon Shlomo Azari was living in the lap of luxury at One Hotel South Beach, dining at the hotel's Habitat restaurant or buying cocktails at the rooftop bar. Whenever he bought drinks, food, or spa treatments, he told the hotel to put it on his sister, Eugenie's tab. Azari was impersonating Eugenie's brother, Will, despite looking nothing like him. In fact, Azari never even met the tennis player he was claiming to be the sister of. Azari kept up the lies for 2 months before Eugenie's team saw a huge red flag on her hotel bill. They disputed a $29,000 charge on July 30th, and the hotel opened an investigation. When police showed Bouchard a picture of the man claiming to be her brother, she confirmed that she didn't know the man, and he had no permission to put any of those charges on her tab. Azari was arrested at One Hotel South Beach in August 2019. Miami police charged Azari with possession of scheme to defraud, identity fraud, and grand theft. Number 3. Handy butchering. Damian Stephen Butler is a former butcher from Sydney in an area called Riverstone in the city's northwest. His friend, who remains unnamed in the media for legal reasons, previously faced years of appalling neglect as the child of drug-addicted parents. He was desperate to earn a big profit and make a better life for himself. After Butler's butchering career didn't take off, and his friend was driven by unparalleled greed and ambition, the duo saw an opportunity in a completely different industry: fashion, more specifically, counterfeit handbags. The trio of Butler, his wife, and the unnamed man raked in hundreds of thousands of Australian dollars from importing fake designer bags. Butler's dream was always to be a butcher. A combination of increasing financial pressure and his failing business encouraged him to brainstorm a new way to get rich quick. and fund his wedding and honeymoon. And with the approval and help of his new wife, Danielle, Butler succeeded, for a little while at least. Butler, driven by financial greed, started the scheme in 2018 by importing more than 2 tons of counterfeit handbags to Australia from China. He sold the bags at a profit on eBay, raking in hundreds of thousands of dollars. More than half of it went to Butler, while the other half is said to have gone to the unnamed accomplice, who's the alleged mastermind behind the scam. Butler and the accomplice were longtime friends of over a decade before deciding to go into illegal business together. The scheme earned a profit of more than $340,000. The unnamed accomplice took care of sourcing the bags in China and importing them into Australia, while Butler took care of the business in Australia, selling the products online. Investigators eventually detected the crime and charged the scammers with violating the Trademarks Act. At trial, Judge Chris Kregel had sympathy for the unnamed accomplice, who had a history of childhood trauma that drove his unharnessed greed. The judge pointed to the man as someone who had a strong moral compass and could have been a shining example of overcoming hardship the right way. But instead, he faced prison time. Butler and the man were charged with importing, selling goods, exposing goods for sale, and possessing goods for the purpose of trade or manufacture without permission of the registered owner. They received a maximum prison sentence of 2 years and 3 months. They'll be eligible for release after 14 months with good behavior. Butler's wife, on the other hand, was slapped with an intensive correction order for 18 months for her role in the scheme. As prison guards whisked Butler away from the courtroom and into a government vehicle, he mouthed, "I love you," to his wife as she sobbed and said goodbye to her scamming husband. The trial also revealed that in addition to the unnamed man, Butler and his wife, there was a 4th person involved in the crime. It was the counselor and lover of the unnamed man. She was sentenced to a 15-month intensive correction order in December for her role in the ploy. The judge also commented on her relationship with the man, saying that it was completely inappropriate for her, the counselor, to be involved romantically with her client and helping him to execute a crime worth hundreds of thousands of dollars, while she was supposed to be helping him find and maintain stability in his life. This courtroom drama didn't end well for this pair of star-crossed lovers. Number 2. YouTubers in crisis. The McBrooms aren't your average American family. There's Mom, Catherine, Dad, Austin, and their 3 young children, Alea, Elle, and Steele. But aside from being a picture-perfect family, they're also extremely famous on YouTube. They call themselves the Ace Family online and boast nearly 19 million followers who religiously watch their videos about the ins and outs and silly dalliances of navigating life with young children in the U.S. today. But in October 2021, the McBrooms were in the news for a less than funny matter. Their $10 million Los Angeles mansion was in foreclosure. The couple made a fortune from their YouTube channel, which originally started as a way to record and share some of the fun they have as a family. As more and more people watched and subscribed, advertisers started paying the McBrooms the big bucks to appear before their videos on YouTube. They started landing media gigs and press deals. When their beloved home was broken into, the McBrooms decided that it was time for a change. This time, they could afford a lot more than a modest house. When Catherine discovered the home in LA, she immediately fell in love with the beautiful properties, views, and the home itself. It was actually 2 homes being built on neighboring properties, but the couple loved it so much that she asked the contractor in charge if he could turn the 2 homes into one huge mansion that spanned 2 acres on both properties. He said yes. That's where our story starts to get interesting. The couple loved the contractor's modern style on both homes. The McBrooms funneled millions of dollars into the construction required to combine the houses. They paid the contractor daily, out of pocket, to finish the property and make changes to the landscaping and any other necessary changes. The contractor and his wife made a new corporation under a random name to receive the money from the McBrooms, but the house still didn't have a certificate of occupancy, which is required in order to live in it. The contractor kept promising to get it as soon as possible. Every time they tried to get someone from the city to come and inspect the home, no one ever showed up. A few weeks after the family transferred millions to the contractor, the company was dissolved, and they never heard from the contractor again. He ran off with their money, even though the home was far from finished. But the couple was already paying a $70,000 mortgage per month on the property, and the lease ended on their last home. Even though the house wasn't finished and didn't have heat, water, or electricity and couldn't pass inspection from so many builder mistakes, the McBrooms had nowhere else to go. The family lived in the house without any utilities for over 2 years. Catherine got pregnant with their youngest child, son Steele, 2 months after moving into the home. It was especially stressful for her because she couldn't even do laundry, cook, or shower in her $10 million house. There was no heat, and she was constantly shivering. Eventually, the house went into foreclosure. While many people were quick to blame the family for building a home they couldn't afford, it was much more complicated than that. The home went into foreclosure because it couldn't pass inspection, not because the McBrooms couldn't afford it. But still, Catherine looked on the bright side. She was just grateful to have a home in the first place with the people she loves most. She never complained, never got emotional, and didn't tell anyone about the situation except close friends and family. She didn't want anyone's pity or sympathy. But ultimately, when paying a $70,000 monthly mortgage, the conditions were unacceptable. When they started looking into the contractor's past, they realized that he wasn't even a licensed contractor in the first place. He was using someone else's license. The real contractors who owned the land came to see the progress of the home but never introduced themselves to the McBrooms. It turned out that the real contractors and the fake contractor devised a deal so he could use their license to work on the home for a well-off, famous family. In the end, though, the fake contractor never followed through on the deal and ran away with millions. If the couple wanted to salvage the home and live in it, they would have to funnel at least another $1 million into it in order to fix all of the other builders' mistakes. But at that point, it wasn't worth it to live in the money pit of a home that caused so much heartache and headache. The couple started renting a new home with their 3 children, but when they were looking for somewhere to go, many landlords didn't want to rent to them because of all of the rumors floating that the family couldn't pay their bills, when in reality, that was far from the truth. The owner of the home they're renting made them pay 6 months rent up front for fear that they wouldn't be able to pay it later on. Rumors spread further when a TikToker discovered the family was selling some of their furniture online, but they were just selling it because they were downsizing to a home less than half the size. But Catherine's endless positivity and kindness even extended to the fake contractor who scammed her out of millions. She never pressed charges against him because his company already declared bankruptcy. It wasn't worth the time and energy to sue a man who was already in financial and legal ruin. Catherine had some words of advice for new homeowners. She recommended making sure you have the right team looking out for you, especially a house manager whose job it is to review all of the paperwork and make sure that it's legitimate. She warned against blindly trusting people because they invite you to dinner and are kind to your family. Don't take someone's word for it if they say they have a license. At the end of the day, Catherine called it a lesson learned. An expensive lesson. Number 1. Recruiting the finest. Michael New seems to be a typical resident of Slidell, Louisiana, a place that's about 30 minutes outside of New Orleans. But Michael isn't your typical Southern man. He's also connected to a ring of Nigerian fraudsters scamming Americans online. Michael teamed up with some Nigerian scammers to con vulnerable people across the U.S. out of their money. He signed up to be the middleman in the scams, which operated by phone and online. When he got the money from his victims, he wired it to his co-conspirators in Nigeria. In one version of the scam, victims received an email saying that the government wants to share some of the millions of dollars being illegally transferred out of Nigeria. Victims had to provide their bank account number and identifying information in order to receive the money. They also had to pay some of their own money to the scammers with the promise that they would be reimbursed. The email's author promised to pay back the money as soon as the illegal funds left Nigeria. But of course, the victims were never reimbursed. The money they were promised doesn't even exist. The Nigerian scam has been around since before the internet. In one version of the scam, a letter sent to people's homes said that they were the beneficiaries of a will and needed the victim's bank information in order to transfer the inheritance. During the oil crisis of the 1980s, some Nigerian scammers claimed to offer bargain oil prices in exchange for some cash. Many Americans fell victim to it. Once police caught wind of the scam, they opened an 18-month investigation against him. Most of the leads led to suspects outside of the United States. Michael was one of the only ones in the U.S. But still, the police had no idea the number of people he swindled. He was charged with 269 counts of wire fraud and money laundering. He was held at the St. Tammany Parish Jail in Covington, Louisiana, until sentencing. The FBI recommends sending any letters or emails you receive from Nigeria directly to the Secret Service so they can track down the scammers.
Sarah Panitsky, at one point, was Britain's most wanted woman. She was number 21 on the National Crime Agency's Most Wanted list, but her face didn't fit in. Among the tough-looking men with cruel expressions was a 5'7" woman with straight hair and blue eyes. She looked out of place among the other criminals on the list, as if someone had made a mistake. But as they say, you can't judge a book by its cover. She wasn't the most ruthless or intimidating person on the list, but she was one of the hardest to find. In July 2016, a series of arrests rocked the UK as British police slapped the cuffs on an international money laundering syndicate. Their task force, named Operation Volter, uncovered a scam resulting in the largest tax fraud in British history, totaling over £1 billion. The story splashed across media outlets worldwide like the BBC, Telegraph, Sky News. The 18-member gang was arrested, and all but one member went to jail. Sarah vanished into thin air and evaded justice for years. But who was this elusive criminal? Sarah grew up in the lap of luxury, but she didn't think it was enough. As the eldest of two kids, Sarah lived in a large, detached house in the picturesque village of Escrick, near York, during the 70s. She attended prestigious York College for Girls before going to St. Peter's School. St. Peter's claims to be the third oldest school in the world and comes with a £34,500 tuition fee per child. She did well in school and was known for her confidence. Old acquaintances mentioned how well-spoken she was, a silver tongue that would play a significant role in her scamming years. Her father, Leo, built his fortune in real estate and insurance. Neighbors said the family driveway was lined with Porsches, BMWs, and Mercedes, a flashy statement for a man intent on showing off his wealth. Sarah and her family were quite popular and mixed well with other wealthy British families. Panitsky was clever, but also a bit of a rebel. While hailed as an outstanding debater by her school magazine, she had a reputation for getting in trouble. She'd often leave the house to party and smoke with other teenagers. She wasn't one to shop with other girls, but favored getting pints with the boys her age. Her parents tried to keep her under control by building a bar in their home garden. It came equipped with a TV and a pool table. They wanted to keep an eye on Sarah, who was already starting to cause some trouble. Unfortunately, their plans didn't hold up, and Sarah took off, chasing boys and the party life. She was just 13 when she set her eyes on one man, several years her senior, who remembers her as a silver fox. She told him to come back and visit her when she was a few years older. Teenage summers were spent on Costa Blanca, where her parents had a second home, and from where Sarah would fearlessly free dive off cliffs and into the sea. A friend called them adrenaline junkies, saying they'd go high diving off of rocky areas along the UK coast. Sarah encouraged her friends to take the dangerous dives, but most of them backed off. Sarah had no fear and jumped off the cliffs, free-falling to clear the Spanish waters below. Over time, Sarah fell in love with the crystal blue water and quiet coves of Spain. Her passion for Spain became well known with British authorities, who assumed she wouldn't be far from the coastline villas. The family had it all between luxurious houses, suntans, and flashy sports cars. That was until Sarah's luxurious life came to a halt. In 1993, when Sarah was 19, her father was arrested for buying council houses and selling them early for a hefty profit. Police caught wind of his scam and launched an investigation. He was sentenced to 4 years in prison for corruption. One local said it was only a matter of time before he got caught. In the UK, council houses are a form of public housing built and controlled by local authorities. In 1985 and 1988, control of these houses were given to non-profit housing associations backed by private funding. So, when Sarah's father started buying and selling these houses to turn a profit, local authorities knew something was fishy. They said Leo was a friendly guy. He may have been a bit loud and flashy, but he always bragged about his work. Some people in their town considered him something of a con man. Whispers went around that he'd fleeced people and had gotten away with it for years. The arrest derailed Sarah's life. She took time out of her studies to visit Leo in prison. In a letter written to her ex-boyfriend, Sarah said the whole ordeal was the worst situation she'd ever been in, only made worse when they broke up after 2 years. She often visited her dad in prison, sometimes annoyed by his moody demeanor and harshness towards her mom. But eventually, Leo left prison and hasn't been in trouble since. Sarah traveled to Barcelona for her master's degree in business management shortly after her father's sentencing. Over the next decade in Spain, she learned French, worked for property rental companies, and volunteered volunteered in local nonprofits. She had a comfortable and respectable life and dreamed of eventually owning her own hotel. But as the saying goes, the apple doesn't fall too far from the tree. Sarah followed in her father's criminal footsteps when she worked with the infamous tax criminal Jeffrey Johnson. He helped her pull off the biggest tax scam in British history. They met through an acquaintance, and Johnson recruited her into his web of 18 fraudsters located throughout the UK. Jeffrey also liked to keep crime in the family business, running frauds with his son until they were arrested in 2017. So how did the gang of fraudsters pull off the scam? The group created a network of companies that bought mobile phones VAT-free from Europe. Basically, these phones are priced without an added tax. VAT stands for Value Added Tax, which is a tax that follows a particular product along the supply chain. However, the tax system is up for debate. Some countries, such as the UK, have them, whereas the United States does not. Some products, like insurance, for example, are VAT exempt. Phones, however, usually are not. The group then sold these phones in the UK at a higher price, including the tax amount. After the phones were sold, the company disappeared without paying anything to Her Majesty's Revenue and Customs, or HMRC, a government body responsible for collecting taxes in the UK. They basically are the IRS of the UK. Sarah's scam is called Missing Trader Intra-Community Fraud, or MTIC. Their network organized a carousel of companies that laundered the money around the world, enabling them to claim back tax they never paid, thereby robbing the public purse twice. First, they charged people the added tax for the phones. Then they claimed they had already paid taxes to the government and filed for returns. As the money launderer, Sarah traveled to Dubai, Spain, and the tax haven state of Andorra to clean the money the gang stole. She also controlled the accounts of the front companies remotely through IP addresses. A lawyer told Vice magazine that Sarah's syndicate sold more phones in 1 month than the entire country put together. The VAT fraud was so successful that Sarah laundered over £1 billion, and it only took her a few years to do it. Sarah kept up appearances throughout the scam, holding down jobs as a hotel worker and property investor. With her 2 dogs and long-term partner, she lived in a gated community in a historic fishing village about an hour from the center of Barcelona. She enjoyed every bit of money scammed from taxpayers, frequenting the nearby town of Sitges, known as the St. Tropez of Spain due to its mega mansions and wealthy European residents. She spent her days enjoying the best food and wine the Mediterranean coast could offer. Her neighbors knew she and her husband were well off, but didn't suspect she was a criminal. However, British authorities caught on eventually, and Sarah's life of luxury soon turned into the life on the run. The fine dining and luxurious lifestyle caught the British taxman's eyes. In 2005, HMRC noticed suspicious activity in some of Sarah's accounts and conducted a 21-month investigation into the fraud she was a part of, codenamed Operation Vulture. The entire network was arrested and faced trial at Kingston Crown Court in 2013. Sarah and her fellow fraudsters cried innocence, claiming they sold the phones but weren't aware of any fraudulent sales. The jury didn't buy it, and all 18 members received sentences totaling 135 years. They handed Sarah an 8-year sentence, but she never showed up to accept it, disappearing before the trial concluded. The leader of the gang, Jeffrey Johnson, also evaded arrest by claiming he had health issues. He stayed away from police while traveling throughout Africa until he was finally arrested in Dubai with his son in 2017. Sarah was granted bail and still had her passport during the trial. She was allowed to travel to and from Spain during the trial for some reason. One day, she just decided not to come back. From then on, authorities put her on the UK's most wanted list. She was the only woman on that list, a sore thumb among the cruelest of hardened career criminals. The most wanted announcement shocked her father. He said it was terrible for his daughter to be on a list full of violent criminals. Her brother Leon and other family members distanced themselves from Sarah and her crimes over the years. Leon told Vice magazine that the saga was incredibly difficult for everyone involved. Other family members say they don't condone what Sarah's done and want to stay away from her reputation as a criminal. Her friends felt differently, finding the whole thing amusing and sharing their thoughts on social media. They wished her luck in her new life on the run. One said she hoped Sarah was sunning herself on a beach somewhere drinking cocktails. Sarah evaded world police organizations for the next decade. She cut off ties with her family and missed saying goodbye to her father, who passed away in 2020, to evade capture, Sarah hardly left her hideout. Police almost caught up with her in 2015 as they watched her husband come and go from her house near Barcelona. However, Sarah caught wind of the police presence, changed her appearance, and made a daring escape before they could slap the cuffs on. Justice finally caught up to Sarah on a lazy Sunday morning in March 2022 while she walked her dog. An elite Madrid-based fugitive unit surrounded Sarah and arrested her. This same unit took down notorious Irish gangster Jerry the Monk Hutch in 2021. Sarah had been hiding out with her longtime partner and dog in the small Spanish town called Santa Barbara. Authorities received a tip about her whereabouts in February and were on round-the-clock Panitsky watch to ensure she did not disappear again. While being arrested, she looked far from the criminal type. Wearing a brown shirt, jeans, and sunglasses, Britain's most wanted woman looked no different than any middle-class person. She didn't fit in at the Madrid prison either, awaiting deportation to the UK. Though Sarah isn't going down without a fight as she's trying to appeal her forced return to the UK. Sarah faces up to 17 years of jail time, almost double what she would have served if she never ran. Even with the arrest, her mother Pauline said she's happy to see her daughter is still alive. That statement is a true testament to a mother's unconditional love, although the British taxpayers probably don't feel the same way. In August 2013, Michael Goguen was a successful venture capitalist who wanted to be an international Batman fighting global crime and terrorism. He also loved to brag, not about his wealth or his business, but about his love life. Goguen was a partner at Sequoia Capital and had no problem telling his employees about his bedroom conquests. One of his employee confidants was Matthew Marshall, who claimed to be a former CIA agent in a reconnaissance unit with the Marine Corps. He proved himself by showing Goguen the prayer beads he said he took off of an enemy's body. For Goguen, Marshall was the most trustworthy person possible, or so he thought. Goguen bragged about a 20-year-old woman he met on a night out in one message to Marshall, who responded, "You're the man." Over the next few months, Goguen exchanged detailed messages with Marshall about his intimate encounters. He also revealed how he maintained his public image by hiding his affairs. He used safe houses in Whitefish, Montana, and kept tabs on possible enemies. Marshall was hired to help Goguen with an off-the-books paramilitary mission in Mexico, thus helping him achieve his goal of being a global hero. Goguen sent him an advance of $400,000. They formed Amnator Group, which was designed to focus on intelligence operations that would help the most vulnerable people around the world. One of Gogwen's many missions was to rescue women from danger in Africa. But Marshall had his own plans. He wanted to lead assault teams on rescue missions and other operations. He just needed Gogwen's wallet. Throughout their partnership, Goguen wired Marshall more than $2 million. However, Marshall wasn't the honest countryman he claimed to be. He was never a CIA agent and was never involved with Marine Corps reconnaissance. Court documents later revealed that Marshall served in the Marine Corps Reserves between 1994 to 1999 and was dishonorably discharged after 82 absences from inactive duty training. In 1996, he was hired as an Indiana State Trooper, though he failed to mention that he had recently quit a different police department when they suspected him of a burglary. Marshall spent all of Gogwen's money on his own family and friends, never putting a dime towards the people Goguen was trying to help. Goguen is from Bedford, Massachusetts. In 1996, he joined Sequoia Capital, a venture capital firm known for its early bets on businesses like Apple, Google, YouTube, PayPal, and Cisco. He became a billionaire venture capitalist through the company. As the money rolled in, he spent more time in the small town of Whitefish, Montana. Goguen built a 75,000 square foot mansion with a 30,000 square foot bunker that could house up to 25 people. He lived in Whitefish with his fourth wife and owned the local bar called Casey's. He also had his own investment firm called Two Bear, which invested in early-stage biotech and cybersecurity companies. His repertoire also included Two Bear Farm and Two Bear Air Rescue Foundation. He became somewhat of a Whitefish local hero by funneling millions of dollars into search and rescue operations. Goguen had the town of Whitefish wrapped around his finger. Then he used it to his advantage. Goguen painted himself as a philanthropist. Rumors circulated around Whitefish that the police were looking for him. Thousands of court documents containing text messages, emails, and testimony proved his womanizing ways. He used luxury safe houses where he would take these young women for privacy. He installed a basement boom boom room with a dancer pole at his bar. He wanted to keep his activities on the down low to maintain his pristine public image. He reportedly kept a spreadsheet listing over 5,000 women he was intimate with. The New York Post compared him to Harvey Weinstein and Jeffrey Epstein. Gogwin's attorneys quickly sued the Post for false and defamatory statements. Marshall was clearly a fraud, so why didn't Gogwin notice it before? Did he fly under the radar because Gogwin was knee-deep in blackmail and misconduct allegations? Things were souring between former workout buddies Gogwin and Brian Nash. Before 2008, Gogwin and Nash had a friendly relationship, but things changed when Nash's wife Stephanie filed for divorce and thought Gogwin was to blame. Stephanie and Gogwin apparently had a long-term love affair. Nash found out, and the divorce proceedings began. Gogwin supported Stephanie emotionally and financially throughout the process, giving her a credit card, putting her and the children up in a 5-bedroom home nearby, and paying her legal fees. However, Stephanie denied any romantic relationship with Gogwin. According to court documents, Gogwin brought his children and babysitter to Nash's home, where he was intimate with the babysitter. Nash found out, called him a pedophile, and reported him to the police, but nothing happened. In 2013, Nash demanded $250,000 in legal fees related to the divorce, but Gogwin refused. Nash threatened to expose Gogwin's affairs if he didn't comply. In 2014, Gogwin sent Marshall an encrypted message saying Nash had to be dealt with. Nash kept sending harassing messages to Gogwin, his wife, children, and friends. Gogwin reported Nash's blackmailing attempts to California law enforcement, but charges were never filed. In 2019, he filed a federal criminal complaint against Nash using information acquired by the FBI. Nash eventually entered a plea deal for a single count of blackmail. In exchange, the charges were dismissed, including interstate stalking and interstate communication with the intent to extort. Things changed for Gogwin in 2016 when ex-mistress and exotic dancer Amber Baptiste accused him of misconduct between 2001 to 2014. Baptiste claims Gogwin gave her a disease and he agreed to pay a $40 million settlement. However, he only ended up paying her $10 million. Gogwin also demanded that she call him emperor or king. In 2012, Baptiste claimed that Gogwin left her injured in a hotel room, after which she had to get surgery. Gogwin denied everything and filed a countersuit. The California state court didn't believe Baptiste's claims and issued a restraining order to keep her from making more false claims. The court found Baptiste guilty of extortion and fraud and had to pay Gogwin $14 million in damages. Still, Gogwin lost his job at Sequoia Capital. A representative for the company said that even though Gogwin was found innocent, they no longer wanted him working there. His exit from Sequoia didn't seem to affect him much because he was still worth more than $5 billion. While Gogwin was submerged in controversy, his most trusted confidant, Marshall, quietly scammed him. In 2013, Marshall texted Gogwin requesting $500,000 for a covert mission to Mexico. He said the money would go toward personnel, equipment, and bribes. In a later text, Gogwin sent Marshall a news article about women being abducted in Nigeria, saying that he hoped Amnator could help them too. Marshall was hired to help Gogwin save the world and spy on his enemies, including Nash and Baptiste. When Gogwin said that he wanted Nash taken out, Marshall had to talk him out of it. Marshall was tasked with hiring a private investigator to follow Baptiste and use Amnator's resources to target her. He even tried to get Baptiste deported to Canada. But a year after Gogwin asked Marshall to put Baptiste under surveillance, he started having his doubts about Marshall and Amnator. To make up for his lack of expertise, Marshall hired a real CIA agent named John McGuire who had decades of experience. Another former CIA alum named Mary Beth Long joined the team. Since you probably don't know, she used to be the Assistant Secretary of Defense for International Security Affairs. Gogwin needed international security clearance to accomplish his Batman-like goals, but Long wasn't sure he could get it because of his legal battles. He suggested making Amnator a global company to bypass some of the United States' requirements. This never happened. Between 2013 and 2015, Gogwin sent Marshall over $2 million for paramilitary missions that never happened either. One of the many assignments was to lead assault teams to strike Syrian extremists and rescue anyone under their control. Instead, Marshall spent the money on himself and his family. Marshall was also tasked with purchasing jewelry, vehicles, properties, and more to pay off Gogwin's mistresses or anyone who knew too much about his misconduct. Marshall also funded their vacations, healthcare, and education. In exchange, they'd dance for Gogwin or keep their mouth shut. His mistresses had Marshall's number in case they had any issues. One time, Marshall was called to Africa to help some Playboy playmates who lost their passports on a safari. In 2015, Gogwin confronted Marshall about how he was losing trust in him. he wasn't getting the transparency and honesty he hoped for from the Amnator CEO. Marshall panicked and sent Goguen a long text message detailing how much he valued their friendship. He said he'd never betray their friendship or trust no matter what. Goguen had permission to run him over if he was lying. Meanwhile, Amnator was experimenting with new ways to make a profit, such as working at the Olympics in Rio de Janeiro or traveling to Iraq to sell intelligence support to the Kurds. Another business venture involved designing a high-speed boat to help foreign governments capture pirates. None of these ideas were very successful, and the Amnator vice president, Chip McKelton, confessed to making things up as they went along. Though it's never okay to be scammed out of $2 million, Goguen probably doesn't deserve much sympathy. When women reported Goguen to the police, they basically ignored their stories. Turns out, some members of the Flathead County Police Force were on Gogwen's payroll. Goguen also had installed a system to listen to police communications. In 2018, one woman told a local police officer that Goguen took advantage of her and then paid her $1,200 to go away. At this point, even Marshall urged the officer to report to the FBI. But Goguen bribed the cop with luxury elk hunts and rides in his private jet. Nothing came of the investigation. Instead, it was handed to Detective Shane Erickson, who let the investigation fall through. Erickson told Marshall that he was spending time with Goguen at his house in Whitefish Lake, and they went on coyote hunting expeditions together. Finally, Goguen bribed Erickson by inviting him on a $20,000 private Colorado elk hunt. Later, the female victim recanted her story after signing a non-disparagement agreement with Goguen. Marshall realized that Goguen was bribing Erickson and sent a message to Police Chief William Dial, who wasn't a big fan of Goguen. The two started conspiring to oust Erickson from the police force. That summer, Erickson confided in Dial that Goguen was taking him on the luxury elk hunt. It's unknown whether Dial ultimately approved the trip, but he acknowledged in private messages with Marshall that it would be a conflict of interest. Dial resigned from the force shortly after. Marshall, Baptiste, and Nash were all unsuccessful in their cases against Goguen. Somehow, the billionaire always managed to come out on top. In Gogwen's countersuit against Marshall, Marshall pleaded guilty to wire fraud, money laundering, and tax evasion. He also admitted to lying to Goguen about where the company money was spent. The indictment also showed that Marshall lied about his CIA and Marine Corps past. Baptiste also lost her legal battle against Goguen when she failed to meet discovery requirements. Goguen filed a counterclaim against her, and the court discovered that she had forged medical documents and therefore lost almost all credibility. Goguen won the case. Nash also lost his crusade against Goguen. He was charged with multiple counts of stalking and communication with intent to extort. He pleaded guilty to misdemeanor blackmail and was sentenced to 5 years probation. Marshall, Baptiste, and Nash all lost their individual legal battles. So, they joined forces to take him down. In 2021, they filed a civil suit against Goguen, claiming that he hired them to build a private security firm and used them in a racketeering scheme against anyone who threatened to expose him. Marshall, Baptiste, and Nash accused Goguen of silencing enemies and tampering with evidence. As of November 2021, 4 of Gogwen's former employees sought more than $800 million in damages. When some of the allegations against Goguen made it to the news, Goguen turned around and sued the New York Post for defamation. Every time someone tries to take Goguen down, they end up shooting themselves in the foot. Are his accusers really just after his money, like Goguen claims? Or does he just have outstanding lawyers? As former Whitefish Police Chief Bill Dial said, this man has to be stopped. He's a billionaire like Harvey Weinstein and Jeffrey Epstein. There's a lot of people in this community who know what he's about, and they're afraid of him. I guess we'll see. Life was looking good for Charlotte Morgan. She had been offered a new job and had just finished talking to a coworker about her future plans when she went to her local gym for her evening workout on Wednesday, August 24th at Virgin Active Gym in Chiswick Park, London. It wasn't until 9:30 p.m. when she finished exercising and went to the locker room to get her things that her nightmare began. She discovered that the padlock she used on her locker was gone and her backpack had been stolen. Certain that nobody would have been able to figure out the code to unlock the padlock, she was convinced that somebody must have used wire cutters. However, how could a person get away with doing something like that in the open? Charlotte was about to find out that the security systems that the gym had in place were no match for a sophisticated thief. All of Charlotte's most valuable possessions were inside of her backpack. It was where she kept her cell phone, bank card, house keys, and bike lock keys, all of which were now in the thief's possession. Without her cell phone, she had no way of calling the police or reaching out to a friend or family member for help. She rushed to the front desk, where 2 other members stood looking concerned. They entered the gym at the same time she did, and she found out that one of them had their belongings stolen too. Another odd thing that happened when they went to check in earlier that night was that the electronic entry system was down, so they had to write their names on a piece of paper instead. With the gym not being as secure as it would typically be, her fear turned to her stolen bank card. She had to jump through many hoops to get her bank account frozen. The staff at Virgin Active refused to let her use their phone or computer, claiming it went against their security policy. Eventually, a colleague came to her aid and let her use their phone. Before she could find out if there were any unauthorized charges to her account, the call handler forced her to answer a series of security questions to confirm her identity. Once her identity was approved, she was given the long list of transactions charged to her card. Between her starting her workout and calling Statlander's hotline, thousands of pounds had been spent. Suddenly, she was helplessly watching her money be spent in real time. The first transaction was just after 8 p.m. at the Apple Store in Westfield Shopping Centre, located in West London, where they spent £3,000. At around 9 p.m., they moved on to a second Apple Store on Regent Street, spending around £1,000. The last transaction was at Selfridges, where an initial £750 was charged. By the time they were able to put the hold on the account, the stores had already closed for the night. If the gym let her access her information on their computer, then she would have been able to stop the thief sooner. Santander should have noticed that the purchases being made on her card weren't normal. In fact, they were completely different from her regular spending pattern. She had never shopped at an Apple store before, let alone been to 2 other stores on the same night. Also, she would rarely spend a lot of money at once. She knew that there were supposed to be protections in place to stop this from happening. Shocked, she asked why the bank didn't try to stop these transactions. It turned out that texts querying the purchases were sent to her stolen phone. If she had her phone, then she would have immediately been able to stop this from happening. Instead, because the fraudster had her phone, it was easy for him to approve every single transaction and continue their shopping spree. All the while, Charlotte was left frantically trying to figure out what to do. Hoping that she reached the bank in time to stop anything else from being charged to her account, she was horrified when the call handler informed her that there was an additional pending charge of £3,000 to her account. She was watching herself getting scammed in real time. The criminal spent more money on their shopping spree than Charlotte had in her entire account. Already upset that the text checking for fraudulent payments went to her stolen phone, she didn't understand why her account didn't overdraw. It should have never been possible for so much damage to be done to her account. The Santander call handler told her that money was transferred from her savings account in increments of £2,500. Her life savings were in that savings account and could have helped her stay afloat while she waited for the rest of the charges that night to be reimbursed. Not only did someone have her bank card, but they also managed to access her entire account at Santander. Left in shock, Charlotte found herself stranded at the gym that night. Keys to unlock her bike were gone, her house keys were stolen, and she couldn't call for an Uber or reach out to her landlord without her phone. It wasn't possible to get a hotel without any money, so Charlotte resorted to spending the night at her office where she was a TV producer. She sat at her desk all night as she researched what had happened to her and tried to figure out how she would get her money and possessions back. In the morning, she contacted her landlord and he gave her a new key to her house. Then began the excruciating wait for answers. Police told her when she filed her initial report that they would get back to her in a few weeks once they reviewed the security footage, and Santander said they would investigate the case too. Unfortunately, a few days after the initial incident happened, there was a long weekend that delayed the answers she desperately needed. The anticipation was so grueling that she could barely eat or sleep. Virgin Active UK refused to take responsibility for what happened, stating that they never take fault for theft. They claimed that the turnstiles were in the middle of a quick reboot when Charlotte checked in that night, which was the reason why a member of the staff was writing down people's names as they entered. Members of Virgin Active Gym in Chiswick Park were also never told about the theft, even though another woman had her things stolen that night too. But turning off the turnstiles and just writing names is still breaking protocol for security anyways. Santander took it a step further and even blamed Charlotte for the situation. She was accused of either writing the PIN number on her bank card or writing it out on a piece of paper that she kept in her bag. They went as far as saying that she must have shared the number with colleagues, friends, or a family member before they told her that she wouldn't be reimbursed for the transactions charged to her account. There was no proof that her negligence caused what happened, but the fact that her PIN was used meant that Santander refused to accept the blame. She took to Twitter to share her story. She detailed the entire ordeal in a series of tweets, from the card entry system not working that night to Virgin and Santander refusing to accept fault. Tens of thousands of people shared the tweets, and she received a flood of responses. Local firemen offered to free her still-locked bike, and a nearby restaurant offered her a gift card for a free dinner. A member of Virgin Active in Chiswick Park wrote a reply where she questioned if it was safe for her to keep going there. People also sent her links to places where she could report Santander and Virgin Active UK for mishandling the entire situation. A bank security expert confirmed that the most likely thing that happened was that the thief took the SIM card out of her phone. Charlotte had so many unanswered questions. How did the thief know getting into the gym was going to be so easy? How could they have hacked her padlock? How were they then able to bypass her phone's facial recognition and passcode to gain access to her phone? How did they figure out her bank card's PIN code? How were they able to change her bank details so easily? Our question is, were they a member of the gym and just decided to do the crime since they could get in easily? Santander insisted that Charlotte was at fault and that her money was lost due to her own negligence, but a Twitter user helped Charlotte piece together one likely explanation. All the thief needed to change her bank security passwords and PIN was her bank card and the SIM card from her phone. Once they had that, they just needed to move the SIM card from Charlotte's phone into their own, where it would then bypass needing the thumbprint security or facial recognition that it would need on Charlotte's phone. However, Santander claimed that it would depend on how a user logged into the app on their phone and that they wouldn't be able to get into it without a passcode or using biometrics to obtain the PIN. They also clarified that the in-app PIN resets are common for UK banking apps and not a feature unique to Santander. A few days after Charlotte's tweets, Santander had a change of heart. The bank called her and agreed to reimburse her for the fraudulent charges. They gave Charlotte a long apology and admitted that they handled the situation poorly and were ultimately at fault. If her story didn't go viral, would Santander have given the money back? Or were they doing it just because they basically were guilt-tripped into it? Following Santander's lead, Virgin Active UK also acknowledged their role in the incident. They admitted to Twitter user @VivaJinsu that their security machine was broken when she entered and that the staff didn't even bother checking people's memberships before letting them through. Virgin Active UK also claimed that they would do whatever it takes to win back Charlotte's trust, but it might be too late. Charlotte confessed to losing all of her trust in banks and gyms. Now, she always locks her SIM card with a PIN number and separates her bank card from her phone. She was still paying off her phone when it was stolen and, as expected, she's still being held responsible for the rest of the payments, as she didn't have any phone insurance. Unfortunately for Charlotte, she still has 20 monthly payments left beginning in October of 2022. These types of simple gym thefts have apparently been becoming more common in locker rooms in London. Many people have already contacted Charlotte to say they had a similar experience after her story went viral. Charlotte's now actively advocating for change and wants to see police, gyms, and banks working together to stop anyone else from going through the same experience as her. Two gemologists sat in the basement of a world-renowned jewelry store in London. A woman named Anna examined millions of dollars worth of diamonds on behalf of some wealthy Russian benefactors. She completed her review and confirmed they were the real deal. Then, she locked the diamonds in a padlock box and left the store until the buyers could send the cash. The next day, the staff discovered the diamonds had been switched for fakes. Instead of million-dollar gems, they found everyday garden pebbles you could pick up from the street. In March of 2016, a sweet 60-year-old grandma carried out the largest shoplifting crime in British history, totaling £4.2 million worth of stolen diamonds. So how did this gray-haired granny swindle millions of dollars in diamonds from professional jewelry executives? Lulu Lakatos is a Romanian-born woman from St. Bruche, France, who lived in a commune with her husband and sister, Liliana. However, these sisters fell on hard times, but instead of walking the straight and narrow, they opted to follow a life of crime. The sisters racked up a slew of theft charges by 2002. When it came time to steal the precious diamonds in 2016, Liliana was wanted in Switzerland for a string of fraud charges. Meanwhile, Lulu was a known thief in France. Liliana's most egregious Swiss crime paralleled the one that would later land her sister in prison. She tried her hand at swindling 400,000 euros, and successfully. She walked into a Swiss bank and, using sleight of hand techniques, swapped a bank envelope full of euros for one filled with worthless paper. A classic switcheroo. Liliana waited for the bank executive to be distracted by a phone call before making the swap and leaving the bank. The police never charged Liliana with the crime for some reason, even though they knew it was her. Perhaps the success of this scheme pushed the girls towards their next big feat. Because these two were pulling off some seriously high-skill crimes, you'd assume they weren't acting alone. And they weren't. In fact, they had a gang of little helpers to aid them in their plans. And for their next big act, the crew zeroed in on a shiny, multi-million-dollar target, Boodle, a jewelry store in London. With their eyes on a much larger prize, one of Lulu's thieving pals contacted the store's owner, Nicholas Wainwright, under the fake name of Simon Glass. He told Wainwright that he was a spokesperson for some wealthy Russian investors interested in purchasing several high-value diamonds. Over the phone, they arranged a face-to-face meeting where they convinced Wainwright to fly out to Monaco to discuss the specifics of this transaction. Although Wainwright didn't do business this way, this Simon Glass character floated a higher price than the diamonds were actually worth. With that kind of money on the table, Wainwright obliged. A source with knowledge of the case said Wainwright thought these strange Russian men were simply uneducated in the jewelry world and had more money than sense. Perhaps Wainwright was so blinded by their offer that he missed all the red flags. Red flag number 1, wealthy Russian investor. Wainwright touched down in Monaco and met Mr. Glass for lunch. After some tough negotiations, they reached a deal for 7 hand-picked diamonds, one of which was worth $2.2 million. The stipulation was that the Russians would send their own gemologist to inspect the quality of the diamonds prior to purchase. Once she verified their authenticity, then the multi-million-dollar wire would go through and the diamonds would be turned over for sale. Wainwright agreed to their specifications, and several days later, Lulu walked into the store posing as the Russians' hired gemologist. She met with Mr. Wainwright and the store's own gemologist, Emma Barton. However, Lulu introduced herself as Anna. She entered the store wearing a camel coat, low-tip designer hat, thick frame glasses, and a pink silk scarf. She removed her coat to reveal a low-cut black dress that, according to store associates, made her look like a Russian dancer. Perhaps she was after a certain allure by dressing this way. Wainwright described it as unattractive, tawdry, and homely. It was distracting, if anything, which was Lulu's plan all along. Mr. Wainwright and Emma led Lulu down a glass staircase leading to the basement vault. There, she was presented with the previously selected diamonds to verify for quality. She weighed the stones and inspected them under ultraviolet light before wrapping each stone in tissue paper. She then placed them into a bag and then into another box. Boodles would keep that box under lock and key until the transaction was complete. Mr. Wainwright watched Lulu like a hawk until he received a perfectly timed phone call from the mysterious Russian investors. He noticed some suspicious behaviors from Lulu at this point, like the fact that she didn't use an eyeglass to inspect the stones, a typical tool for any gemologist. Nonetheless, he walked away to take the call. As soon as Mr. Wainwright was out of sight, Lulu took the zip bag of diamonds and placed it in her purse. Emma sprang into action, saying how she needed to see the diamonds at all times. She couldn't believe she had to ask Lulu to please take them out of her purse. In a broken English accent, Lulu assured Emma that there was nothing to worry about. She was sorry and blamed the language barrier for the confusion. She took the bag out of her purse and placed it back on the table. Emma promptly picked up the bag and returned the diamonds to the safe. When Mr. Wainwright returned from his phone call, Emma Barton immediately told him about what had happened, and he searched Lulu's purse. However, he didn't find anything. Little did he know, Lulu had a concealed pocket inside her purse where she hid the decoy bag and performed the swap. Mr. Wainwright agreed with Lulu, chalking it up to miscommunication. Now in the clear, Lulu left the store with £4.2 million worth of diamonds in her purse. CCTV footage showed Lulu leaving the store and meeting with 2 female accomplices walking alongside her on the street. She discreetly dropped the bag of diamonds into one of the girls' shopping bags as they walked. Then she turned into a nearby pub where she stopped inside for a cold one. Here, she met another member of her con artist gang named Georgetta Danila, who brought her a change of clothes in the bathroom. After the pub, the two caught a train to Paris. The 2 women who now had the diamonds in their shopping bags met with 2 more male helpers named Stankovic and Jovanovic. The men caught their own taxis bound for East London. 3 hours after committing the crime, Lulu was out of the country. Within 24 hours, she'd come in, committed the crime, and left. The following following day, Emma couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right about the mysterious gemologist named Anna. So she decided to x-ray the padlocked box of diamonds just to be sure. The x-ray confirmed her suspicions. They opened the vault, removed the bag, and checked inside. They were horrified when they discovered 7 worthless pebbles similar in size to the diamonds. Police tracked down Stankovic and Jovanovic by the ID number on their taxi. However, it's unclear what eventually led them to Lulu. They made off with the diamonds in 2016, and the 2 men were arrested shortly after. However, Lulu remained at large until 2021. Did Stankovic and Jovanovic talk? Did the police find enough evidence? Nobody can say for sure. After her arrest, Lulu was extradited to the UK to stand trial. In a shocking twist, Lulu claimed her sister, Liliana, committed the crime. Here's the catch. Liliana passed away in 2019 after a car accident. According to Lulu, Liliana admitted that she was the fake gemologist months before her accident. As the story goes, Liliana stole Lulu's passport, traveled to the UK, and swiped the diamonds. She even took steps to age her appearance to look more like Lulu, who is 9 years older than her. Lulu was upset when Liliana came clean. However, she didn't have time to be angry as she dealt with her husband's prostate cancer. She accepted her sister's promise to make it up to her and turn herself in. Police recovered mixed DNA samples from the garden stones left in place of the diamonds. They also lifted fingerprints from the glass table in the basement showroom. However, the prints didn't match Lulu's, and the DNA results from the stones came back as inconclusive. The prosecution relied heavily on the CCTV footage and Emma's testimony, where she picked Lulu from a lineup and identified her as the culprit. Emma also brought up how Lulu didn't use an eyeglass and how suspicious that was. As for the equipment she did have, she didn't seem to know how to use it. She used her ultraviolet light under the standard shop lights, which a gemologist would never do. Ultraviolet needs to be in a dark room to work properly. The prosecutor, Philip Stott, had a different theory that contradicted Lulu's claim of identity theft. He believed Lulu took advantage of Liliana's death, pinning the crime on her, knowing she couldn't defend herself. Perhaps to seek sympathy from the jury, Lulu fired back. In her eyes, Liliana would be there if she was still alive, confessing to the crimes and accepting her punishment. You can always come back from jail, but you can't come back from death. Maybe this tactic actually worked. Lulu was only sentenced to 5.5 years in prison in order to pay back 250 pounds of the 4.2 million pounds she stole. Meanwhile, Stankovic and Jovanovic pled guilty and were sentenced to 3 years and 8 months. After telling the jury that she had no idea she was even involved in a crime, Danila was acquitted. As for the diamonds, nobody's seen them since. Detectives suspect that one of the stones may have turned up at a Belgian jewelry store in 2017, but couldn't prove anything when the paperwork didn't match. Every report about the case drew the same comparison between Lulu's diamond heist and Ocean's 11. They committed brazen theft in plain view of trained staff. They used sleight of hand techniques and careful planning to get in and out before anyone ever noticed. They swapped the diamonds like Indiana Jones and rode off into the sunset like Frank Ocean himself. In the end, Boodles was out millions of dollars. Millions Lulu probably stashed away on a tropical island. Sarma Melngalis was a passionate vegan chef who wanted to share her love of raw food with the world. Then, she landed in prison. No one would have put Anthony Stranges and Sarma Melngalis together. Sarma was a thin, health-conscious vegan and restaurant entrepreneur. Anthony was an overweight gambler who loved Subway tuna salad sandwiches with extra mayo. Sarma founded a famous raw vegan restaurant in New York City called Pure Food and Wine, where A-list customers like Alec Baldwin, Tom Brady, and Chelsea Clinton regularly dined. He promised Sarma that he could help her dog live forever, and she, a sane businesswoman, really believed it. Sarma was successful. Anthony was borderline homeless. But Anthony promised to help her be more financially independent. They started dating and eventually got married. But their lives were not happily ever after. Sarma and Anthony now face up to 15 years in prison. Sarma was born and raised in Newton, Massachusetts. Her father was a Latvian immigrant who became a physicist at MIT. Her mother was a personal chef who co-founded Allison's Orchard, a 450-acre apple orchard. Sarma's mother inspired her love for fresh, healthy food. Sadly, her parents divorced when she was 9 years old. Sarma attended Newton High School and in 1994 graduated from Wharton College at the University of Pennsylvania with a degree in economics. She moved to New York City to practice investment banking at Bear Stearns. Then she moved to Bain Capital in Boston. Sarma came back to New York City to work at CIBC, but soon quit to enroll in New York's French Culinary Institute. Still, her business and finance background served her well in the food industry, at least in the beginning. Sarma and her then-boyfriend, Matthew Kenny, opened Commissary in 2001. Kenny was a well-known chef, author, and speaker in the restaurant industry. When they closed Commissary in 2003, Sarma consulted for Jeffrey Chodorow's China Grill Management. In 2004, Chodorow, Kenny, and Sarma opened Pure Food and Wine, New York's first upscale raw food restaurant. It was located near Gramercy Park and was consistently rated as one of the top restaurants in the city. Pure Food and Wine was listed twice in New York Magazine's Top 100 Restaurants and the Platt 101. It ranked on Forbes' All-Star New York Eateries list for 5 years in a row. The consistent praise for Pure Food and Wine and the high prices and upscale atmosphere made it a hotspot for celebrities. Alec Baldwin, Chelsea Clinton, and Tom Brady were frequent customers. Baldwin became especially friendly with Sarma. He invited her to a staged reading of Moby Dick in the Hamptons. Then he confided in her about his desire for a wife and children. Sarma encouraged him to get a dog, but he resisted. She fixated on the idea and fell in love with the image of a brown pit bull named Quinn she found online. One night, she woke up crying about Quinn, so she adopted him from his Brooklyn shelter. When she broke up with her then-boyfriend, Sarma kept the puppy and changed his name to Leon. Meanwhile, Baldwin kept coming back to the restaurant and even met his current wife, Hilaria, there. In 2011, Baldwin made Hilaria a Twitter account. One of her first followers was someone with the handle @Disciple of Todd, who went by several nicknames like Mr. Fox or Mr. Longbottoms. Mr. Fox already had some back and forth with Baldwin, so Sarma started following him on Twitter, and that's when they started flirting. Anthony was raised by his parents in a ranch house in Brockton, Massachusetts. His father, John, was a local policeman and avid gambler. His mother, Patricia, decided to leave him after 7 years of marriage and one child together. But when she told him she was leaving, he threatened her. Little Anthony came into the room and things settled down a bit. The family sat together for 3 to 4 hours as Anthony's father threatened violence on his soon-to-be ex-wife. Finally, John left the house and Patricia called the police. The police called John and informed him of his wife's pleading phone call. He stormed back into the home and ripped the phone off the wall. After they officially divorced, Anthony spent his time with both parents. Patricia tried to secure full custody of her young son, but failed. Anthony never graduated from college. In 2004, a 23-year-old Anthony lived in a trailer park in Sarasota, Florida with his father. He met Stacy Avery, a young mother who had just separated from her husband. Anthony came on strong to Stacy, and they eventually got married in Las Vegas after only a few months of dating. Stacy was taking birth control, and Anthony persuaded her to stop. She got pregnant soon after. Anthony didn't have a house, but Stacy did, so he moved in with her. Anthony then pawned her jewelry, saying he was in line to inherit $5 million from his aunt. To prove it, he took Stacy with him to the financial advisory firm Raymond James to tell them how he wanted his money invested. Some of the money would go into a college account for Stacy's daughter. Things took a scary turn when the couple visited Anthony's father's trailer. Anthony tripped over a heating vent and found a grenade in it. He told Stacy they were out to get him. She scoffed, noticing that was an antique grenade with no pin. It was clear that Anthony had strategically placed it there. She started questioning her decision to stay with Anthony, and she couldn't help but wonder, who is they? In 2005, Stacy fell 3 months behind her mortgage. Anthony had already pawned all of her electronics, and she had nothing to her name. So Anthony took off without any word of warning to Stacy, her daughter, or their shared 8-month-old baby boy. Anthony has never visited his son, nor sent any child support to Stacy to this day. He and Sarma started talking in 2011 while living out of his father's van in New Bedford, Massachusetts. The father-son duo often traveled from casino to casino. In July 2012, Anthony's father passed away in the van at 72 years old. To this day, nobody knows what happened. Sarma and Anthony talked online for a while and finally met in person in New York in November 2011. Anthony wasn't in bad shape, but definitely looked different than he appeared online. His personality was too big to ignore, and the two started dating pretty seriously. Anthony promised to give the already successful Sarma enough money to become independent of the investors who wanted a piece of Pure Food and Wine. He offered to help pay off her debts, including $1 million for Chodorow and a $500,000 mortgage she took to bail Kenny out of a poor restaurant investment in Maine. But none of this money materialized. In 2012, Sarma tried to break up with Anthony. Instead, they got married the next month. Anthony promised Sarma that she would be safer as his wife. Anthony became a manager at Pure Food and Wine in 2013 and was introduced to employees as Shane Fox. In 2015, the staff at Pure Food and Wine and One Lucky Duck, a retail store and juice shop attached to Pure Food and Wine, staged a walkout. Sarma hadn't paid her employees more than a month's wages, and it wasn't the first time. Sarma was forced to close both restaurants. In an interview with Well and Good, she said the delayed wages were due to poor profit margins due to expensive ingredients and mounting debts. Sarma said she was also suffering, having missed her own rent payments. But to employees, Sarma blamed a recent change in banks. In 2015, Sarma reopened both Pure Food and Wine and One Lucky Duck, but most of the staff did not return. That July, the team held another walkout due to unpaid wages. Both restaurants were permanently shut down. Sarma's massive debt increased even more, and now she was a wanted criminal for labor law violations, tax fraud, and grand larceny. Police put out a warrant for the loving couple, but they disappeared for nearly a year, leaving investors and staff wondering if they would ever get paid. They owed investors $844,000, employees $40,000, and $400,000 in sales tax. In 2016, Sarma and Anthony were arrested at a hotel near Dollywood after he ordered Domino's Pizza using his real name. They stayed in separate hotel rooms, and Sarma denied that the pizza was for her. Anthony's warrants detailed similar crimes. He was a fugitive from justice, wanted for grand larceny, scheme to defraud, and labor law violations. Sarma was offered a plea deal in which she would serve 1 to 3 years in prison. Her attorneys were planning a coercive control defense. She pleaded guilty in 2017 to stealing more than $2 million from investors, scheming to defraud, and criminal tax charges. It was discovered that this money funded luxury vacations and Anthony's gambling addiction. She was sentenced to 4 months in prison and 5 months of probation. After spending 4 months at Rikers Island in NYC, Sarma filed for divorce from Anthony in 2018. During their marriage, Anthony allegedly convinced Sarma of several outlandish things, but Anthony's lawyers deny all of the following information. Anthony started by telling Sarma about his brother, who was a surveillance expert and was connected to dangerous, mysterious forces. Anthony told her that his brother knew Sarma's computer had been hacked and she had to send him the login info to her email, cell phone, and bank accounts for her own safety. When she protested, Anthony asked if Sarma had taken her antidepressant, Wellbutrin, that day. He told her she couldn't trust herself or her memory due to her medication. Anthony also told her he had a gift that allowed him to immediately tell the difference between blue shirts and red shirts, a metaphor for good people and bad people. Apparently, some of Sarma's employees at Pure Food and Wine were red shirts. Anthony was also borrowing millions from Sarma, saying that each loan was a cosmic endurance test. He said that passing would change her life. She would become a global brand with a documentary that could change the food industry and help eliminate factory farming. He promised Sarma that she would finally accomplish her goals and could stay young forever. Meanwhile, Anthony gained weight. Unlike Sarma, Anthony was not vegan. He told Sarma that being attracted to him despite his obesity was another test. He constantly told her that he and his mysterious brother were always watching her. Anthony apparently even called a raw food restaurant in Los Angeles where Sarma was eating, even though she hadn't told him where she was. Mr. Fox is on the line, he said. If she didn't pass these tests, he threatened, Anthony and his brother would come for her. He told Sarma that her beloved dog Leon was actually his dog in a previous life. Their meeting had been 1,000 years in the making. If she passed these tests, he promised Leon would become immortal. Anthony even scammed Sarma's mother. He begged her for money to support his wife, who was recovering after losing a baby and struggling with bulimia and depression. Sarma's mother believed him and lent him $450,000. According to the indictment, Sarma transferred $1.6 million from her business account to her personal account. Anthony apparently spent $1.2 million of this at casinos. Whenever Sarma was out of town, Shane, aka Anthony, acted like the boss and frequently demanded a week's worth of cash receipts from Pure Food and Wine. Anthony's half-sister once heard Sarma yelling at him, wondering when she would receive the cash he promised to refund her. Suppose all of Sarma's claims are true. In that case, she could have been suffering from coercive control, a form of domestic cruelty that uses psychological manipulation similar to cultish behavior, even even if only one or two people are involved. In a case of coercive control, one person tries to eliminate another person's sense of reality and all other options. Sarma's defense team argues that Anthony was a con artist who manipulated her into believing that she would get it back tenfold if she lent him money. In March 2022, Netflix released Bad Vegan, a miniseries from the producers of Tiger King and Fire, the Greatest Party That Never Happened. The docuseries tells Sarma's story, but doesn't shy from less glamorous allegations that she was a vegan who ate cheese and stole thousands of dollars from her staff. Sarma turned her professional company website into a personal blog called Sarma Raw, where she went into detail. She called the miniseries disturbingly misleading and criticized the marketing campaign for associating her name with fraud. She says Netflix twisted her words, left out many important aspects of her story, and made it seem like she and Anthony are on good terms. The whole series is told from her perspective, but producers cast doubt on her whole story in the last 10 minutes of the final episode. To this, Sarma pleasantly asks why, and justifies it as a cheap way to get viewers. The DEA was used to calls about dealers in suspected drug houses, so they were surprised when an NYPD officer called them about a strange story about a team of adult entertainment waitresses who were targeting rich men. He told them how one particular guy went to a bar, met a server, and flirted with her. Then he woke up in a hotel room with no recollection of what happened between meeting the server and waking up in the hotel. All he remembered was sipping his drink while talking to the cute girl, and bam, everything went black after that. However, he did know a couple things. His credit card had been charged thousands of dollars for drinks and dances he didn't remember paying for. There were also service tips, lots of service tips. He also noticed several pictures he didn't remember taking. The girl he flirted with snapped some very problematic pictures, the kind he didn't want his wife and family seeing. The NYPD wouldn't take the case at first. Many people complain about having their credit card stolen on a drunken night, especially in New York. But the man had evidence, and the investigation moved forward. The DEA had no idea what they were getting themselves into. It all started in 2013 when Samantha Barbash came up with a system for scamming guys at the club she and her friends worked at. The individuals involved were Barbash, the leader, and 3 other women who followed her system: Roslyn Keogh, Karina Pescucci, and Marcy Rosen. The women came from different backgrounds, but they all shared a common goal. They loved money and were willing to scam the disgusting rich men who wandered into their club night after night. In a Robin Hood-like tale, these women missed one crucial step. They stole from the rich and gave to themselves. Though the women had worked in the so-called gentleman club business for some time, they had yet to discover what they were capable of. The film Hustlers depicts the cunning quartet as erotic dancers, one of the film's hallmark gimmicks. But in reality, they weren't all dancers. Barbash made sure to note in her J-Lo lawsuit that at the time, she wasn't a dancer, but a hostess and a server. She saw dozens and dozens of men walk into her club every weekend. These particular men were dressed in expensive suits, wore $5,000 watches, and usually had nice wedding bands hidden deep inside their pockets. She realized that these men had a lot to lose, more than just thousands of dollars in disposable income. So, she devised a plan. This plan ensured that on paper at least, they could scam these men and not have to worry about getting caught. What were these guys going to say? I got robbed at an adult club? Their wives would probably have a few questions of their own. The way Barbash saw it, there was a golden opportunity just lying on the table. Someone needed to pounce, and it might as well be her. That's when she assembled the team. Keogh was Barbash's right-hand woman, the Brad Pitt to George Clooney's Danny Ocean. They taught other women how to pull off the scam, small step by small step. Every weekend night, they'd go out to a bar near the financial district where most of these guys hung out. Barbash approached men, flirted with them, talked about their work and personal lives, all while drinking tons of alcohol. Then, Barbash texted the other girls and told them to come over. She had one on the hook. The other girls, Keogh, Pescucci, and Rosen, would show up and butter the now intoxicated dude even more. Barbash started dancing in clubs at 19. In 2013, she was 30, so she knew how to manipulate men into doing what she wanted, which typically involved draining their credit cards. Due to the bar's proximity to Wall Street, many were finance guys working on Wall Street. Bankers, traders, brokers, investors, hedge fund managers. Barbash watched them come into her club for years. Some of these guys spent $100,000 a night, usually pulled from their 6 or 7-figure limit credit cards. The tricky part was having your bucket in the right spot when the Wall Street money started raining. Barbash knew a way to find those sweet spots. she realized that there were two different types of men the quartet went after: the disrespectful guys and the guys who were white knights. The rude guys could be manipulated with alcohol and attention. As mentioned earlier, Barbash would call the other hustlers over to the bar. They would flirt like crazy, make him feel important, then they would invite him to their gentleman's club. Once they got to the club, the quartet would run the crap out of his credit card over a period of several weeks. They'd accumulate 5-figure tabs on some nights. Other times, they'd swipe for 6-figure sums. After they swiped their cards enough times, the quartet took the men to a hotel where they had a whole trap set for their target to fall into. When the man entered his room, he lay down on the bed expecting something dirtier than dancing. Unwilling to solicit promiscuous activity themselves, the quartet outsourced. They recruited street workers to come up to the hotels and pose for blackmailing photographs. So when the men woke up the next morning, he would have a good reason not to report the scam to the police. As for the white knights, they required a completely different approach. Q explained that while some men visit clubs to drink and enjoy the show, other men, however, go to fall in love. They walk in and see beautiful women trapped in an exploitive relationship with greedy club owners and disgusting patrons. In other words, they saw dancers as damsels in distress, and they were the only ones who could save them. Keo says these types of men are the easiest to bilk. Once they say I love you, the dancer knows they'll give her whatever she wants. There's no need to flirt and intoxicate them, just go along with his fantasy and collect money. Keo says that men bought her cars, pay her rent, and purchase expensive jewelry for her, all in the hopes that they'll quit and let the man save her from the dancer's life. While rude guys and white knights might seem different, they all fit into the overall strategic process. This process is called fishing, though Barbash preferred a more subtle term, marketing. Barbash and Associates marketed a lot during 2013. They made more money than they could have ever imagined, especially Barbash, who took home the largest cut. She and the other hustlers bought new cars, clothes, and other luxury items. But the work wasn't always easy. They often had to work all night, trying to seduce drunk, handsy men into a club, then a hotel room. Barbash recalls not getting off until 6 a.m., with just enough time to take her young daughter to school on weekday mornings. She admitted in subsequent interviews that the stress was heavy after a couple of months of constant scamming. Each target took weeks to scam without them noticing, especially the rude types. Each time the target partied at the gentleman's club, they had to swipe the card. It would have been much easier to steal the entire payload in one swipe. Barbash admits to succumbing to this temptation a time or two. It was also tempting to break another rule of Barbash's system: only scam targets on the client list. Normally, Barbash chose targets she knew. These individuals were on her list of clients she'd entertained in the past. Other targets belonged to other hustlers' clients' lists. By only scamming people they knew, the girls could keep track of who they were scamming and how much they were stealing. However, the girls got reckless after a while. They'd see wealthy-looking men sitting at the bars. By that point, they knew the right type to look for and buy them rounds of shots to get a conversation started. Without knowing these guys, the quartet would save time by seducing them, drugging them, and eventually luring them to the gentleman's club to drain their cards in one swipe. These sloppily scammed targets didn't remember how they ended up in a hotel, but they noticed a massive credit card bill pop up on their phone the next day. The man who contacted the NYPD was the wrong guy to scam. He doesn't remember much about the night he was scammed, but he did happen to have a recording of the girl who scammed him. No one has officially identified who this dancer was. Keo conveniently says she doesn't remember the girl, though she does remember the amount of money she stole from him, $17,000. Keo also recalls how the man came to her and begged for his money back, saying he had a mortgage to pay. Keo responded with a cold no. She was running a business after all. What she didn't count on was how desperate the man truly was. He felt his only option was to seek out the authorities. The DEA eventually caught the dancer who drugged and scammed her guy and interrogated her using the recording as evidence. She couldn't deny her involvement, so the NYPD offered her a deal. The DEA said she could get off easier if she helped them expose the other hustlers by going undercover. She agreed. Before long, the dancer was mic'd up and sitting in a bar with Keo and Barbash. Barbash recalls how the girl was acting weird the whole night. She tried to get her and Keo to drug a random guy's drink. Barbash thought her associate was just eager to score some scam money, but Keo had a hunch that something was up. Barbash told her that she was paranoid and not to worry about it. In hindsight, Barbash said she should have listened to Keo, because not too long after the sting, investigators obtained enough data to arrest the cunning quartet. After only 4 months of scamming, Barbash, Keo, Rosen, Paschusi, and a few other dancers were all arrested on the same day. Despite committing several felonies, none of the hustlers saw any prison time. Barbash, the ringleader, received 5 years probation. Marcy Rosen and Karina Paschusi were sentenced to weekends in jail for 4 months, and 5 years probation as part of a plea deal. The hustler's probationary time is now up. These days, they live relatively normal lives, though they may never live down those 4 months in 2013 when they scammed some of New York's wealthiest men and inspired a Hollywood blockbuster. As for the lawsuit, a judge dismissed the case in May 2020. Samantha sued J-Lo for $40 million while claiming the actress misrepresented her in the film. The judge ruled that the film was based on a 2015 article written by Jessica Pressler called The Hustlers at Scores and never mentioned Samantha's name in the movie. While the article was written specifically about the quartet scam, the film took its own creative liberties. OneCoin was a money heist that took billions from investors between 2014 and 2018. The brains behind this scheme was Ruja Ignatova. Although the US government previously estimated OneCoin's take at $4 billion, there are sources that claim the worldwide take was as much as $15.8 billion as of early 2018. What made OneCoin so attractive? It was its viral, commission-driven structure that helped it to be sold to many vulnerable, tech-naive communities such as working-class England and South Asia. Ruja Ignatova is a well-educated woman with a PhD in European private law. And it's a good thing she has a lot of lawyer friends because in 2012 she was convicted of fraud in Germany. She was actually sentenced to 14 years in prison, but her sentence was later suspended. So, what did she decide to do? Create one of the biggest scams ever, because why not? Ruja, along with her lawyer, Sebastian Greenwood, created a Ponzi scheme that had the hottest thing going on for investors at the time: blockchain. They created OneCoin, a coin that they promised to rival Bitcoin. Bitcoin's rise in value from a few cents to hundreds of dollars per coin by mid-2016 had retail investors hungry for more ways to get rich quick. In case you don't know how crypto works, the only thing you have to understand is this: something is only valuable because other people think it's valuable. Whether it's money, diamonds, or gold, it only works when other people put value on it and trust the value can hold. For a long time, people have tried to create digital money, but everything always failed because no one could trust them. They would always need someone in charge. With someone in charge, they could manipulate the supply, and there goes the concept. But Bitcoin solved that problem. It depends on a database called a blockchain. Basically, it's a giant digital book of every transaction that involves any Bitcoin, and everyone has a copy of it. Every time a Bitcoin is sent, a record of that transaction goes into everyone's book. Nobody could change it. So this means that Bitcoins couldn't be manipulated and could not be hacked. Bitcoin gave way for the potential to change how banking works. Bitcoin, with its blockchain, became a game changer. What Ruja knew was that the average person wanted to get rich fast. And with Bitcoin's fast rise, she knew that she had something to see to the masses. The scam was predicated on enthusiasm and a quick sell. All of the talks geared around how the people were so lucky to be getting in at that stage. Ruja would pitch that OneCoin would be like Bitcoin, it's going to be bigger. Ruja would spin her background of a degree from Oxford, a PhD from Constance, a stint with the respected management consultancy McKinsey. Who knows if all that was true? It probably wasn't. Her main thing was to take advantage of the fact that the average person she was pitching to just didn't understand what they were investing. What's a blockchain? Who knows? Does it even need to exist? No. Even if it did, what did it do for OneCoin? Who cares? The coin was going to the moon. Seriously, the thing is this: if you don't understand how a specific investment makes money, you should not invest in it. Ruja would also specifically recruit experienced multi-level marketers. We'll go through a super quick rundown on how multi-level marketing works. Basically, let's say you're selling makeup. Whatever makeup you sell, of course, you keep 100% of the profits. But let's say if you bring in someone else into the business, then you get a percentage of their sales too. And whoever they bring in, you would get a cut too, and so on. This type of business is actually legal. But if you think about it, it basically operates as a pyramid scheme because only a small number of people make a lot of money, and it's the people at the bottom doing all the work. And Ruja would bring in these types of people on purpose. She recognized that established multi-level marketing sellers with a huge base had the perfect type of people to market her fake coin. This was the secret of OneCoin's success. It was an old-fashioned pyramid scheme masqueraded as a coin with a future. OneCoin's corporate structure was incredibly complicated. Obviously, it was on purpose. For example, Ruja bought a property in Central Sofia. Technically, it was owned by a company called One Property. One Property was owned by another company called Risk Limited. That company was owned by Ruja, but was then transferred to some unnamed Panamanians, but it was still managed by another company called Paragon. And Paragon was owned by another company called Artifex, which was owned by Rouge's mother Vesca. And back in 2017, the ownership of Artifex was sold to an unknown man in his 20s. Is this needlessly complex? Yes, if you're running a legitimate business. But it's absolutely necessary if you're running one of the biggest scams the world has ever seen. This scam quickly became one of the biggest scams the world had ever seen. What exactly was the main business? Because really, just having a blockchain doesn't mean anything. OneCoin's main revenue was supposedly from selling educational materials for trading. Members were able to purchase educational materials for exorbitant prices ranging from 100 euros to 118,000 euros. Obviously, no one was buying any sort of educational packages. There was absolutely nothing that the company came out with to generate revenue. Their only way to get money was to pitch investing in the company. For every package that gets purchased came tokens, which the buyers can use to mine coins. Basically, the more money you spent, the more tokens you got, which meant the more coins you could mine. And the only way of exchanging the mined OneCoins was through OneCoin's own exchange. In early June 2016, Ruja Ignatova walked on stage at Wembley Stadium in London in front of thousands of investors. She told the cheering crowd that OneCoin was on course to become the world's biggest cryptocurrency, quote, for everyone to make payments everywhere. To some people, it sounded like free money that would give them the financial freedom they're looking for. And all they had to do was hand over their money to invest and not worry about anything else. Plenty of people were convinced. For example, Jen McAdam. She invested 10,000 euros herself. Not only that, she persuaded family members to put in an additional 250,000 euros. People from over 175 countries invested back in 2016. Investors on the lower packages were convinced to invest in bigger packages because of the extra benefits. Of course, investors were shown the growth of their investments. The horrible truth was that those rising numbers were totally meaningless. They were just numbers typed into a computer by OneCoin employees. Jen was constantly told she was part of the OneCoin family. She had a OneCoin leader who got information from the headquarters in Bulgaria, and her leader prepared her carefully for conversations with any OneCoin skeptics. Any criticism or awkward questions were actively discouraged. This is basically how cults work. You always have to be able to think for yourself, no matter the situation. Here's the worst part. Remember when we said that OneCoin targeted tech-naive communities? Well, typically that also means poor. OneCoin targeted the poorest people because they're typically the people who were the least educated. For example, thousands of Ugandans bought into OneCoin. It took 700,000 Ugandan shillings, or roughly $250, to buy a OneCoin starter package. Poor investors became increasingly important to OneCoin. That's because in Europe, less money was invested in the first 6 months of 2017 compared to the same period in 2016. But in Africa, the Middle East, and in India, it was the complete opposite. As the money started drying up in Europe, promoters turned more and more to third world and emerging countries. When it comes to running a scam, they don't care who it is they scam, rich or poor, it doesn't matter. There were many people that doubted OneCoin as early as 2015. One such person was Bjorn Bjerke. After actually getting recruited by OneCoin, he investigated deep within the company. They had wanted him to be the chief technical officer for them, so he did due diligence on them. And he became one of the first people to discover that there was no blockchain at all. There wasn't anything invested in any technology. Of course, when you're dealing with a scam involving billions of euros, there are going to be people that don't want him to blow the whistle. According to Bjorn, he learned in his research that Ruja had never expected OneCoin to grow so big. It was never supposed to be a billion-dollar scam. She actually tried to shut it down, but people in the underworld that she was connected to wouldn't let her since they were making so much money. Anyone that was interviewed about their involvement wouldn't discuss any of the players involved with organized crime, except for one person. OneCoin grew to 10 million, then quickly to 20 million, then 30 million, and it just quickly snowballed into the billions. And all the publicity stunts and all of the investor money rolling in, one day, Ruja just disappeared. She was famously punctual. She was supposed to show up and talk at a European OneCoin promoter meeting in Lisbon, Portugal in October 2017. This was where she was supposed to answer brewing questions of why payments had been delayed, but she never showed up. However, even when she disappeared, the scheme didn't end. OneCoin kept running despite the controversies surrounding the scam. And this is where her brother comes in. Konstantin took over as CEO of OneCoin and continued in the footsteps of his sister, even with the Ponzi scheme controversy going on. Let's be serious here. Does this guy look trustworthy here? Also, really, he has the word con start his name? This simulation we're living in has a good sense of humor. Konstantin continued with the scam and promised to take OneCoin above and beyond. He promised that an IPO of OneCoin would occur sometime between 2018 and 2019, and it would make everyone rich. Obviously, the IPO repeatedly postponed, and it never took place. Just how did so many people get duped? Scammy sales tactics and persuasion. People fell hard for the time-sensitive sales tactics. Once they bought in, they were all in. It's psychology at this point. People don't want to admit that they were ever wrong, so they just doubled down. No matter what the evidence is, it's just human nature to protect their reputation, intelligence, and identity. The fact of the matter is the vast majority of people make irrational decisions. Then they rationalize their decision-making afterwards to make themselves feel better. Even more amazingly, even after Ruja, Konstantin, and Sebastian were officially charged, people continued to invest in the coin. Despite all the evidence, investors simply just didn't want to miss out on the next big thing. So all they had going for them was hope and prayers. In March of 2018, Konstantin Ignatov was at LAX waiting to fly back to Bulgaria after some OneCoin meetings in the US. Just as he was boarding his flight home, FBI agents arrested him and charged him with fraud in connection with OneCoin. Ruja is still missing today. The last confirmed report is that she had flown to Athens back in October of 2017. She's officially charged with absentia with money laundering. Her partner and lawyer, Sebastian Greenwood, was arrested around the same time as her brother. It's interesting seeing how her brother and her lawyer weren't smart enough to disappear. One popular theory is that Ruja is sailing around the world on a yacht. Of course, support for this theory is limited. It leans mostly on the fact that Ruja liked yachts. She had her own multi-million-dollar yacht docked in the Black Sea. She'd throw regular parties on the boat and had her $2 million Bulgarian mansions that were close by. However, the staff claim they haven't seen her since 2017. As the hunt for the missing crypto queen continues, authorities uncover a new piece of her lavish life almost every day. In 2021, a German court found that Ruja spent $18.2 million of stolen money on a luxurious mansion in London. The 4-bedroom luxury flat was packed with expensive artwork, including a rare Andy Warhol. It also had a private swimming pool. During his trial, Konstantin gave up information about his sister. According to him, she had gotten a passport and asked him to get her plane tickets to Vienna, Austria, and then Athens, Greece. So where is she today? Nobody knows, and it feels like she'll be on the run forever. Konstantin eventually pleaded guilty in November 2019 to several charges that included money laundering and fraud. As part of a plea deal. Yep, he decided to rat out his associates in the underworld. According to official court documents, at least, he has the option of going into the witness protection program. Click here to watch one of these next videos. And let us know in the comments section what you would rather have right now. $1 million in Bitcoin or $1 million in another coin.